That one, the little coloured room. That's fire. Yeah. Do you want me to? There we go. Here.
Yeah.
The gold letter. You're back on.
Okay. Okay. Right.
There you go.
Super. Now I've got to get rid of that. Good morning, both. I'm afraid that we had such a fast turnaround this morning that I've actually cocked things up slightly. So you're going to have to live with me for a moment or two.
See if you just tap that one, let's say,
and
then hide it. Yeah.
Hide.
So click control and then go into there.
That one there.
There you go. That's got, and then add to there.
Right. Okay.
There.
Then we're going to have to.
So we could do. I believe it's Cinemalia. Nope. Sorry. Newsletter. So that will just show they are.
Yeah. We need to get them.
Number 3.
Center stage. Though.
There we go. Oh,
yes. Yes. I'm so sorry because it was a very fast turnaround this morning and I kept hitting the wrong buttons. You know me in technology. Good morning, Philip. Good morning, Richard. Very good to see you.
Morning, Keith.
How is Scotland?
It's lovely. It has been absolutely gorgeous, I have to say. The weather's great. I know you've had good weather.
We have indeed. In fact, it sent Philip to the pub, and he wasn't seen for several days.
No.
In my dreams.
I can well imagine that. No. So, apart from, as I said, we had a sea fret yesterday morning, which was actually quite a relief. And then that got burnt off. But it's, another beautiful sunny day out there now, and so I'm taking a wander up to the harbour in a little while. Which is,
You've got a harbour where you are.
yeah, Dunbar has 3 beaches and a harbour. You know, you're spoilt for choice, frankly.
Now, Philip, what have you been up to?
Very little. As somebody who is despised by you, who will never retire, I am retired. And I've become the house husband par excellence and the chauffeur taking my wife and picking her back up from work, which is fine.
Well,
Other than
your
that,
public
very little. I don't
appearances.
see very many people. I can't walk into town anymore because of my knee. So,
But you
yeah,
drive.
And his bail condition, of course. Yeah.
You drive, Philip.
Could you repeat that, Keith? I'm sorry.
You drive.
I've
Drive a
tried.
Drive.
Oh, is this the monkey joke?
No, it's not. I'm asking if you drive.
I'm being very thick here. I do drive because I've got an automatic car now.
Right. Well, what
I
I was
couldn't
going to
drive,
suggest
and
is that instead of feeling sorry for yourself as a house husband, why don't you come in here one morning a week and co-host?
I'm very tempted to do that. When Jackie's working, that takes out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But a Monday or a Friday will be fine. I do intend to come and see you anyway.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, because actually it's a bit more fun and a bit more hectic being in here. But you and the gentleman below you that you've become very popular figures. So to appear in person once in a while would do us a world of good, and it wouldn't do you any harm either.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, as we've always intended, if I do come in, it will be a day when Richard can free himself from his heavy schedule, and we can have a bite to eat.
This ginger
Yeah,
wine,
that would be very nice.
it doesn't drink itself, I tell you that now.
Now, can I just tell the two of you that your home base has got up a sign saying that it's open tomorrow, but also they put up little flags to let people know. So it's all pretty this morning.
No, as I said, Keith, I commend it to you. And if you have trouble getting in there, ask the security guards, because aside from this is Lewis Crown Court, Phil, open day. Aside from the main steps, if you were to go along towards the rights of man, not going into the rights of man, Keith, I'm not encouraging you.
Oh yeah.
Just don't do that, all right?
Fat chance.
But there's a second door there, which does have a slope that they can deploy. So I think it's possible that you could certainly go into the ground floor of the Crown Court in your scooter.
Well, I've already been over to see them, and I saw the security man, and I said that I'd been told that there was this second door, and that you and Philip were now my mentors, and that you said what jolly good chaps they were. So they bridled a little bit, and I think possibly they'll open up for me.
Excellent, good. Yes.
Well, the important thing, Keith, is to slow down, because otherwise they'll think you're a ram raider.
Yes. Yeah. I did wonder what
Actually,
yeah. Sorry, Keith.
I'll make a confession, Richard, because you see me zipping past your house sometimes. I couldn't understand why the manual said that this thing would go up to 8 miles an hour, and I could only get it up to 5. And there is two buttons, one for fast speed and one for slow speed, and I've been running it on slow speed. I just discovered fast speed. Oh wow! Wait until you come back.
So you have a scooter that effectively has a sports mode.
Absolutely, yes. I thought.
God help Lewis. That's all I can say.
Exactly. If you
Because
have
if
to
you were a total
you need to know
menace
that.
on slow speed.
And I have to tell you that this, Phil, that you talk about a Ram Raider. I have to tell you that the very fine building, which was the HSBC Bank on Lewis High Street,
Yes.
has closed because its ATM has been pulled out of the wall. Now, I'm not saying it necessarily was Keith. I'm working on police intel that I have about this issue.
Well, nothing comes as a surprise to me with Keith and Lewis.
No,
A deadly combination.
no, exactly, quite. He's apparently he's managed to get away with enough money to go and buy himself lunch at Bill's, and that is a lot of money, as you know.
Absolutely. That's top-notch stuff.
Yeah. I've never actually eaten at Bill's. I don't know if I've told you that, but I've never actually eaten there because I remember Bill Collison when I first moved to Lewis, and he just ran it as a fruit and veg shop, and it was lovely.
Well, you were a little late coming to Lewis, because when he was a fruit and veg shop, his mother had the little shop next door, and she did things like steak and kidney pies, and that sort of thing, which when he franchised and became famous around the country, she closed. But you could actually get food there yonks ago. But listen, enough of me. I'm going to sit back and grin purposely, as I normally do, and leave the floor to you two because your public are awaiting.
Phil, lovely to see you again. Greetings from the land of my fathers, as ever.
You're very kind, my friend. You're very kind. And yes, the feeling's mutual, although you increasingly look like the wild man of Borneo, frankly.
I have had 3 adult daughters visit me up here in Scotland, all of whom have told me exactly that. I'm going to get a haircut.
Well, they're people of good judgment. They take after their mum.
I'm actually contemplating shaving the beard off as well, which I know sounds a bit crazy, but I think it's time for it to go.
When you've had a haircut and you've shaved your beard off, and I know what that looks like on you, you look about 20 years younger.
I know, yeah, but I don't want to look 20 years younger. I don't want to look 20 years younger.
Well, others might want you to.
Well, you'll remember James Townend, who used to be, he was my first ever chambers at 1 King's Bench Walk, who went bald at a very early stage in his life. And he always claimed that being bald and therefore looking 20 years older than he actually was effectively doubled his income, because solicitors assumed that he was much more experienced than in fact he was. And so, there aren't many professions where looking older is no bad thing. And I think probably the bar.
Well, there is an area in the job you still do, isn't there? That if you don't do it, but we have colleagues and people we know who do. They dress the part, and they have these flat. And They stand there almost like Rumpole with a great big waistcoat on and maybe a fob watch or whatever, and they just dress to look the part when in fact they're probably rubbish, but they look good.
I'm not sure they look the part. They look the part, actually, is what is the phrase you're looking for, in my view. There was a local. Sorry, we will get around to the topic, Keith. I promise you. There was a judge local to Lewis who suffered from premature balding, and Philip will know who I mean. And one thing that you do when you're doing a case involving vulnerable or young witnesses is that all the lawyers go and see the young or vulnerable witness just to say, I'm Mr. Martin, I'm the man who's going to ask you lots of horrible questions. This is Mr. Smith who's going to stop me asking you those horrible questions. This is the judge who's going to report me to the bar council for asking you horrible questions. You know, you go through all of that. But one of the questions that young and vulnerable people need to be asked is, would you prefer us, the lawyers, to wear our wigs or not wear our wigs? Completely a matter for you. Not this judge. This judge would always say, I'm sure you'd prefer that we kept our wigs on, wouldn't you? Because he was as bald as a coot. And a lovely man, but in his own quiet way, a slightly vain man, I think it's fair to say.
Well, it's hard to be vain when you're bald.
Well, you can see the veins more, if you think about it. Anyway, Phil, on the last occasion, which was the start of my holiday, and now it's the bloody end of my holiday, seriously, let me just weep a little bit.
It's not long enough. You need a much longer holiday than this.
Well, thanks, Phil. Okay, well, can you just phone up Lewis Crown Court and tell them that I'm not going to bother turning up to represent Mr. H next week?
I'll do anything for you, Richard, if it helps.
Well, what would you go and represent him then, please?
Well, I'm not qualified anymore. I'm not allowed. I'm not certified or insured.
Well, I'm sure you're certified.
Yes, I knew you'd pick up on that. So I fed you the line.
And your level of qualification was always a subject of some conjecture, if I can put it that way.
Quite so. And you're about to plumb my depths of ignorance by trying to involve me in the differences between Scottish and English law. I know very little about the latter, and I know sod all about the first.
Phil, I am not going to the depths of your plums. I can tell you that now, regardless of what else you might wish me to do.
There's nothing wrong with my plumbing.
Thank you. So on the last occasion, we spoke about, there's a whole world of topic there about the difference between the civilian system and the common law system in the non-criminal world. So
that was Monday's chat.
Was Monday.
Yes.
That tort, delict, contracts, how it's completely different buying a house. In fact, I don't know if I did mention it, but Mrs. B mentioned it to me that she was involved in a case relatively recently where they got an order which was effectively a sort of protection order for a child, not to take them away, but to just provide them with some level of protection down in Sussex. And the plan, which was executed, was that the child should go and live in Scotland. And because of that, they then had to get Scottish lawyers to go to the court in Edinburgh to get an equivalent order in Scotland because the English order simply wasn't valid in Scotland. You know, it's
No.
it is.
Well, it's a different jurisdiction. No.
Absolutely, yeah. As soon as you go over the bridge at Berwick.
Well, you mentioned the house. Something's telling me that from the past, something's telling me that the minute you've exchanged a contract in Scotland, that's it. The house is sold.
Yes, you cannot be gazumped in Scotland.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Or gazundered, or whatever the opposite equivalent is. Yeah. So, unlike in England, where you have a contract and then it's not strictly binding until you do what's called completion.
Yes, quite.
So the estate agent and the solicitor will go through the various checks on, rights of way and all that sort of thing. In Scotland, no, it's just like that, straight away.
Just like that.
And so you have to be careful about buying a house in Scotland because you can suddenly find yourself having gone, oh, I've just had a big glass of Crabbes. I've gone over to Paris Steel, which is the local estate agents, and I've just put a deposit down on a £250 fucking house. Sorry, I shouldn't swear.
That was a joke. You haven't gone to an estate agent and put a deposit down today, have you?
No, but
You'd like to.
I tell you what I won't do, Phil. I won't buy a place until I know that I can live in it because I deeply disapprove of
Second homes.
Yeah. And there are various things that I need to do in Sussex before that time will come, and hopefully that time will come relatively soon, so I get
Well, I'm going to make sure that you don't actually disappear in my time by making sure that I use my influence to make sure that Nicola Sturgeon is your neighbour.
I'm not living there. I tell you that now. I don't know if you did see when she got arrested, and this sounds a bit mean, but when she got arrested, she was interviewed outside her house. And it really was a sort of quite unattractive modern build. A bit like those houses.
A bit like her.
Yeah. But yeah, an unattractive modern build. Yeah, all right, okay, well, I'll leave it there. I don't need to say anything more. Anyway, we move on.
We're drifting. We need to paddle back.
Sorry?
It's her husband that's got the money.
We need to paddle back to today's topic, which is criminal
Yes.
law in Scotland and England and what differences there are.
Well, the first.
So away you go, Mr. B.
Well, there are several. If you go into a criminal court in Scotland, the first thing is that you won't understand a word that the advocates say because they're all talking to the jury in what they think the jury will understand. And as I've said before, it's the reason I never became a Scottish barrister is that with this voice, I just get nowhere. Secondly, this, and it's only a tiny point, but it's an interesting point, that there's only one place from which you can address the court. So unlike, and you'll see this, Keith, tomorrow when you go into the Crown Court, I'm sure you know anyway, there are long benches, and by tradition, in England, each person has their place, don't they, Phil?
They have their place, and it's rather rigidly formal. Yes.
Explain that to us.
Well, as you say, as Keith may already.
I'm losing you there, Phil.
Two, you have the judge high up. Next level down is the court clerk, and then the lowest in the courtroom in terms of depth are the benches for the barristers and what used to be the solicitors. We rarely see those now, but and you will have a jury box to your left. The prosecution barrister will be on the other side of the courtroom to the jury box. And then whether there's just one defense barrister or a number, let's say there are 4 defendants, each of them are represented by an individual barrister, starting with the prosecutor. The defense lawyers then sit in the order of the indictment. So defendant A, his barrister sits next to the prosecutor, defendant B next to that, defendant C, and so on. So that the defense advocate or advocates are all nearer to the jury. And it's from those positions that they will question witnesses, make submissions to the judge, and then ultimately address the jury. You just don't move. Obviously, you go up and down, but you don't move from those positions.
I suppose the only circumstances in which you might move is if occasionally witnesses give evidence from behind a screen or a...
That's a very valid point, yeah. I've forgotten that.
No, and so sometimes just for sight lines, people have to move across. But Phil's absolutely correct that by convention, the defense will always be closer to the jury. Sometimes, frankly, sitting on their lap, because some defense barristers, like Phil used to be, have no shame at all. Whereas in Scotland...
What does shame mean, Richard? Sorry.
Shame.
Shame is not a word I've heard.
Shame. You've got no idea. No, I can't say. No. In Scotland, in the criminal courts, what happens is all the barristers sit where they sit, or the advocates sit where they sit. And then when they come to either cross-examine or to address the jury, there's a single plinth.
Right.
They all go to one.
Yes.
And they do it from there, which I just find a bit odd. But anyway, there we go. Tell us about juries in Scotland, Phil. That's chucked you a wide ball, hasn't it?
You see, you'll get cross with me, but I really am having problems hearing you. And it's breaking up at my end. Your voice is...
Yeah, Keith, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant. See that? It's that...
Oh, shut up.
It's that flipping microphone use. And you're stubborn. You really are a Capricorn. You're a complete goat. And you look like one at the moment too. Can't hear you at all now.
You're on mute.
You've tapped the mute button.
absolutely right. Well done.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mute.
Anyway, so what is it about?
Did you ask me how many people are on a Scottish jury?
I didn't ask you specifically that, but why don't you tell us that?
No. Well, all I know is there's more than on an English jury. Is that correct, or less?
Yes. No, I think you mean fewer, but we'll forgive you that.
Oh, don't be such a pedant. God. How many then? How many?
Well, they do still, oddly enough, occasionally have civil juries in a way that we don't, particularly in this country. And then you have 12 people. So as Lawrence Fox has found out, and you may remember that Lawrence Fox, the actor, is trying to bring a libel action because he is some sort of right-wing weirdo, frankly. And he has been petitioning the High Court to have a jury for his libel case, and it's been rejected. In Scotland, if it was granted, he'd have 12 people. But a criminal trial, as we're talking about today, they have 15 people, as opposed to our ordinary 12, well, the 12 that we'd have here. And Phil, tell us about...
Oh, right. So
you were
tell
right.
us about what?
Tell us about... Go on. You're allowed to talk.
No, I'm just pleased that my thought was correct. Because when you correct me practically on the word fewer, I thought that would be the answer. So you just did that for fun, really.
Yeah, mainly. Thinking about it, thinking it through. Well, more really quite cruel fun, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's your so-called sense of humour.
It's more my black soul of bitterness, really. But you call it sense of humour. So tell us about verdicts in Crown Courts, or the equivalent of Crown Courts.
Just before you do that,
in Scotland.
Is it a fact that it was the Normans that introduced the 12-man jury?
Yes, it
Correct.
It's because that's where the common law comes from. But the concept of a jury evolved over time, because in England and Wales, and this does seem crazy, but it was the position, was originally a group of people who were witnesses to what had happened. So the jurors weren't just sort of completely independent. They were people who were there and saw what happened at the time of the alleged offence.
Which is exactly what the English and Welsh system bends over backwards to avoid.
Well, no,
now.
but
so the selection.
Yeah. Sorry, Phil.
No. But I know nothing about how a Scottish jury works in terms of majority verdicts or stuff like that. I just don't know, Richard.
No. I was talking about English and Welsh there. That originally.
Yes.
Yeah. So in Scotland, they've got similar rules about majorities, but of course they have a different rule about verdicts, Phil, which I think you do know.
Oh, yes, I do know. In England and Wales, it's either guilty or not guilty. My understanding is that in Scotland, there are 3 verdicts possible: guilty, not guilty, or not proven.
Not proven, exactly.
Which is a very much halfway house. So basically, we think you're guilty, but we're not entirely sure.
Yeah,
there we are.
And you don't get punished if you get it not proven. And it's not a case of, right, let's have a retrial or anything like that. And Phil, I would imagine your experience is to some extent similar to mine, that certainly the sort of closest equivalent within the English and Welsh legal system is where you have a serious offence indicted. In other words, somebody's charged in the Crown Court with something that's serious. But there is a temptation to put on a lesser offence. So in fact, the jury get the chance to consider very serious verdict, moderately serious verdict, not guilty. And the temptation for a jury who may be struggling with deciding which way to go, because some of them think it's the first and some of them think it's the last, is that they plump for the one in the middle. And
yes, well, you and I share that opinion, as do I think many of our colleagues. One can never be sure. The examples of a jury plumping for the lesser alternative as a matter either of ease of conscience or mercy is pretty common. It happens far too often to be just a coincidence.
Yeah, and you and I know it was one of the reasons why in the 50s the rule of diminished responsibility was brought in relation to murder, because juries were left with the stark choice of, we find this person guilty of murder and they will hang, or we let them walk free. So manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility was brought in to give them another option, and that was before capital punishment was initially withheld,
abolished,
and well, it was withheld for a long period of time.
It was suspended. That's correct, but
and then finally
the diminutivity, the 57 Homicide Act was in response to Ruth Ellis.
Yep,
that was the real catalyst for the 57 Homicide Act, because we all know that had it been available to her, the prosecution may even have accepted manslaughter by way of diminished responsibility. But she did herself no favor. I mean, to read about her trial is heartbreaking, because she did herself no favors.
No, I know. Last woman to be hanged in the country?
The last woman?
Yeah.
Ruth Ellis.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually remember that. I was in school. I can remember the whole country sort of held its breath. Knowing
not as much as she did, Keith. I tell you that, mate.
Right?
Not as much as she did.
Well, she was a bit of a gangster's mole, though, was she not?
Yes, but that's not, yeah.
One of my favourite films, which I can recommend to you all, is called Dance with a Stranger. and Dance with a Stranger is the human story of Ruth Ellis and the story of how she became obsessed with the man she eventually shot, was admired by another chap who she never fully loved. It was always believed after the end he provided with the gun and the ammunition to shoot Blakely, the lover, who was played by Rupert Everett in the film. And Ruth Ellis was played by that wonderful female actor who was, she was Queen Elizabeth in Blackadder, but she did more serious roles than that. I'm trying to remember her name. Blonde. Anyway, it's a wonderful film, one of my favourites, and it tells the story. And Albert Pierpoint, who hanged her, said she was the bravest person he ever had to put to death. The bravest. It's heartbreaking stuff.
Before I hang Philip, how are we doing for time? I don't want to overrun our.
No, you're okay for a few minutes yet. While we're just on movies, can I ask both of you, did you see the story of Pierpoint played by Timothy Spall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I thought that was a very good movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think we've shared our admiration for him as an actor before, Keith, haven't we?
Yes, we have. I'm full of admiration for him. I think he plays excellent parts.
Right. I just want to mention. Sorry, but whilst you're talking about films, I want to bring the lecture hall back to where we ought to be, which is talking about Scots law, if that's okay. Excuse my pedantry, as Phil calls it. Two things. First of all, that Peter Tobin, who was, of course, in fact, Scottish, dead now, convicted of 3 separate murders, one in Margate, one in Glasgow, Eastbourne. I always thought that he was Brighton and he had his garden dug up in Brighton, but nothing was ever found. There was talk of him being Bible John, who was a sex murderer in Glasgow. But there's an interesting little Scottish Sussex connection there. This fellow was wandering the streets of Brighton, having already killed and buried 3 women unattractively. But he's no longer with us, so you don't need to worry about him. The other one, which I just want to mention because it has some interest to me, is Dr. Buck Ruxton. Now, there's a name to conjure with, isn't it? Dr. Buck Ruxton, who in 1935 lived in Lancaster with his wife and her maid. And he drove from Lancaster up through Scotland in 1935, chucking things out of his car window wrapped in newspaper. And the things he was chucking out of his car window wrapped in newspaper were, because he was a doctor and he knew how to do it, were cut up bits of his wife and her maid. So he'd murdered both of them. But the only interest to me in the case is that he went through Moffat, which is in Dumfriesshire, and there's a wee little bridge just as you come out of Moffat before you head up towards the Devil's Beef Tub. And my paternal grandfather by that time was working on the roads, and he found some of those body parts and had to give evidence about them. So dear old Grandad Barton.
And if I remember, he is buried in
my grandfather.
Isn't that right, Richard? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah, they're all there. I'm afraid. Well, I bloody hope they're there. I did go up there, and because I had no idea about the difference between Scottish traditions and English traditions, and my dear old maiden Aunt Margaret, the youngest daughter, and of course the youngest daughter in Scotland will always stay and have to look after the parents, and she did, and they were both in their 90s when they went, and she stayed and looked after them, and she smoked like a trooper. And I used to go up and visit her. And one time I said, should we go down to the tavern, the pub? And she said, oh, I don't think I've ever been there. I said, no, come on, Margaret. I'll take you. Come on, I'll take you down the tavern. She said, oh, I don't know. I just don't know. And we went in there, and the barman said, evening, Margaret. She was a right one. But Ruxton did get hanged for obviously for doing what he did, quite rightly. But he got hanged in. See, there's that interesting question that if somebody crosses the border, what do you do with them? I prosecuted some people last year where one of them got picked up in Glasgow because that's where they lived. And in order just to interview them, the police had to drive him over to Carlisle because the rights under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act to interview somebody simply don't engage in Scotland. So you need to get them into England or Wales before you can actually go through that procedure, which does seem a little bit odd. But there we go. Because all the police up here are very, very upset because a few years ago they converted all their local police forces into Police Scotland. So it's one enormous police force. And it's just a process of saving money. And they've leached out a lot of their more experienced officers, I'm afraid to say, as a consequence of that. And Phil, I think you wanted just to talk about, if we've got time, talk about a recent case where there was a vulnerable witness or vulnerable witnesses.
Yeah, the case I read about was the sentencing of a very wicked man who had raped and abused a number of female victims. Not only was he given, this is in Scotland, not only was he given, by our standards, an incredibly lenient sentence. The reason this came to light was that the victims themselves wanted, as would happen in England, wanted to have victim impact statements made outlining the desperately bad effects of the abuse upon them and have them either read out in court or allow them, as was recently done in England, we see Letby, where a day was set aside for these poor people to tell, obviously, an absent defendant, but tell the court and the world what Letby had done and the effect upon them. So it would appear, unless I misread everything, but I don't think for once I have, there is no victim personal statement procedure or an allowance to allow people to tell the judge how horrible the effects have been in Scotland. And that was why it came to light, because there is the response from the Scottish legal authorities, whoever runs it, was that they are looking into the possibility of introducing such a scheme in Scotland. Well, I found that quite extraordinary, because it's absolutely de rigueur in England and Wales. But it would appear not to exist in Scotland.
And I think it goes beyond that, Phil, because you all know that if you're prosecuting a case with a vulnerable witness, it's an absolute requirement on you that Keith, you can't talk to somebody about their evidence. You're not allowed to do that. But what you can do is, and what you are obliged to do, is to go and see them and explain the procedure to them and explain what you think is going to happen and ask them if they have any questions and go through the whole process and blah, 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 which I'm quite happy to do. And oddly enough, I've got a reasonable bedside manner sometimes when I try. Only when I try.
Well, looking like that.
Looking like that, exactly. Quite, yeah. Yeah. Here's your Yeti. Sorry, your barrister. But they don't even seem to have that, and I just find that extraordinary. But there we go.
So
Keith,
that was the point that I wanted to illuminate.
No, thank you, Philip.
Quite extraordinary.
Very useful. Keith, I have a dog who needs to go out, otherwise he's going to do something unspeakable.
Well, Keith, Beth's going to take Keith out in a minute, so that's okay.
The same reason, exactly. Keep him on the lead.
Yeah.
Have you got a bag?
Before you go, just a couple of things that I'd like. First of all, Philip, you were talking about retirement, and if I may say so, you looked like a distinguished retired goalkeeper for Manchester City.
You sweetheart.
I think he looks like three Manchester City goalkeepers all pushed together in the same place. But anyway, that's a different point.
Well, I was going to ask him a legal football question. Is there any correlation between 12 men on a jury and 11 men in a reserve on a football team? No?
No?
Not that I can think of, Keith.
No, I don't.
Let's investigate. It just occurred to me while I was listening to you.
Yeah. No. Well, I suppose there's the cricket team as well, isn't there? So
yes, there is. But just before
the days of 11 men plus one are long gone.
Yes, that's true. Just before you go, this is Bethan's first really full day, and she thoroughly enjoyed being with you the other morning. So she just wishes to say good morning to the two of you because she loves working with you.
Morning, guys.
Not at all. Feel free to join in at any stage. Don't hold back.
Believe me, the first hour this morning I couldn't shut her up. Lovely to see the two of you. Philip, we will talk about you coming in one morning and co-hosting because I think that your fans would like that, and it will open you up to a whole host of other people who haven't seen you yet. And Richard, I hope that you'll be back. Is this your last day of holiday?
Yeah, I'm traveling back tomorrow. Yeah.
And what is your duty like next week?
I don't know completely at the moment. I was due to be starting a trial, and this is just, I regret to say it, Keith, the way the courts are at the moment. I've just got a note in my diary saying there isn't currently a court to accommodate this case. I saw a very senior judge the back end of last week who said, in a Morningside accent, oddly enough, I don't have enough courts, I don't have enough staff, I don't have enough judges, I don't have enough barristers, I don't know what I can do. Because it's just...
We lost you for some reason. Your link went down. Anyway, Philip.
Well, I will say goodbye. And
okay, it was good to see you this
am
morning.
I to see you on Monday, Keith?
Indeed, I hope.
Am I to see you on Monday?
Yes, okay. I mean, that should be a permanent thing in your diary, unless you've got anything terribly more important to do. And people are now getting used to the fact that you and
No.
Richard are here on a Monday and a Friday. So I understand that you've got other things to do, but the more you can be here on those 2 days, the better. And I'm delighted and I'm grateful.
Well, you're very welcome. It's no burden for me. The issue always is Richard, when he's back at work, is so busy. But it sounds to me like he may now be available on Monday.
Yes, indeed. And that's a plus. But I mean, I have, and people have commented that they quite like it when you're available, rather than miss you, is when you're on at 7 o'clock. And I know that this is a problem with you and your wife quite often, but we can always switch to that earlier time.
No. 7 o'clock's fine by me.
Okay.
It's only when I'm taking my wife to work, which is not on a Monday and not on a Friday.
Oh, right. Excellent. Well, then, you and Richard, I mean, particularly Richard would be the key one. We can decide whether we're going to do it at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock.
Yes, well, we'll let you know.
Okay, that's great. That's terrific.
And I'm very pleased to see in the bottom left of your screen, it says the Two Bs.
Yes.
We've got there at last.
Oh, well, I mean, and also your little intro. I think you quite like that, do you not?
Oh, hugely.
So we're putting our stamp on you. And actually now, when people come in, I can simply say the Two Bs and they know who I'm talking about.
Those two bastards, yeah, I know. Bye-bye.
Bye, Philip.
We've got a comment.
Have we?
We've got a
Well, let's see if it's printable.
And in Scotland, they can't ride a cow drunk, if that helps. Yes, it's illegal. It's illegal to ride a cow drunk. That's one of our laws. Someone had to have done it for it to become a law.
It become a what?
A law.
Oh,
so
is that right?
It's against the law to ride a cow drunk.
Somebody must have ridden a cow drunk. Heavens to Betsy. And heavens to Betsy. We learn all sorts of things as a result of these two training, but we both enjoy them slagging one another off, but also the information that we get, which everybody really knows but doesn't know, if you know what I mean. And it's useful to us, to say the least. Okay, well, what we're going to do now is we will be joining Melissa shortly. So what we're going to do now is to say toodle pip for 10 minutes or so, catch our breath, and then we will be back. And as a consequence, what we will do is we will remind you who we are and what you're missing if you're not watching us. And if you happen to watch these things, you say, what on earth is that all about? And you join us for a short period of time and find out. It's a whole variety of stuff. Is no hour is the same as the next. So jump in. Now, this is my new co-host. She can't be here every morning, but she's faithful and here as many mornings as she possibly can be. Bethany, and say hello, Bethany, before you say goodbye.
Hi, guys.
And now say goodbye.
Toodle pip for now, guys.
Toodle pip for now. All right, we'll see you in about 10 minutes' time.